Another very interesting element of the Ontario Party platform, Derek, is this making life affordable. And I know for many of our youth, especially, um, that the future doesn't look good for them. And I told a story just recently about how 30 years ago I was an electrician. My wife was stayed at home. We had four kids. My fourth child was born. I was making $25 an hour, and we bought a new home. And it cost me $112,000 in Carlton Place, which was two times my yearly salary 30 years ago. And a blue collar tradesman could afford to have a home, have a car, have a family, and my wife could stay home and take care of them. And I looked at my youngest son, who was born 30 years ago, and he's making $30 an hour as a tradesman. But that same home that I bought for $112,000 is now selling for over $600,000. That's a real one of the many examples of just how life has become unaffordable in Ontario, and especially for young people. But the Ontario Party recognizes that with some very interesting policies. So fill us in a little bit on how you think the Ontario Party will make the future bright again for the people in Ontario.
Well, you make a great point. And I just had a call with my neighbor the other day. He was telling me both of his kids make six-figure salaries, so over 100,000 per year, and neither of them can afford a house as of yet. They have some decent savings, $80,000 or $90,000 in savings, but even yet they're still not at the point to make that to be able to afford a home. It's interesting, the kind of lifestyle you're talking about was available for everybody in Canada up until fairly recently. I think of my own grandparents who were high school educated. My grandmother only had a grade 8 education. They were photographers, so they weren't doctors or anything like that. They owned their own business. They did weddings every single weekend. They were able to pay off their mortgage in 3 years. Yes, they worked hard. Yes, they were savers, but it wasn't out of the ordinary to be able to do things like that. And, I did the math on that. To be able to pay off a mortgage in 3 years today, you'd need to be making about $1 million a year. Half of that goes to the government in taxes. If you put the bulk, let's say half of the remaining to your mortgage every year, you might be able to pay it off in 3 years. But that kind of thing is just unrealistic today, and people are unable to get ahead, and they're, it's not being able to buy a home and settle down. It has a psychological impact. People want to get married and have children, but they don't feel safe enough psychologically to do so. And that's why we're seeing later and later sort of marriages and kids being born, which then brings us back to our overlords who say, oh, well, that's why we need more immigration. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle where we're pushing things further and further down the road. So obviously, to go back to our immigration program, if we have a lot less people here, the price of housing is going to go down, period. In terms of other things we can do to make life affordable, we're talking about eliminating income tax for people under 35. Now, again, we have control only over the provincial side of things, but we're saying no provincial income tax for anyone under 35, 65% property tax cut for seniors. A lot of seniors aren't able to afford to stay in their homes, which puts an additional burden on their children to have to take care of them. This kind of a property tax cut, which has been used in other places, has been instrumental in enabling seniors to live longer in dignity in their own homes, which is better for them, better for their families. Another thing that bothers me is we have a high sales tax in this province, and we want to make sure that we cut that down. So we're talking about a 3% PST cut, and this will impact everybody on every single thing that they purchase in this province. This is one of three ways that we can make the cost of living better for every single person in this province.
Well, listen, this all these things, yeah, reducing or eliminating income tax for youth will be a real shot in the arm. Of course, having a moratorium on immigration will bring down the price on homes. It will also have create upward pressure on wages as well, as the labor pool will not be so diluted. So those are wonderful, but many people would say, well, how are you going to fund this? All these cuts, and I think the answer to that is very simple. Elon Musk and Donald Trump has showed, and we all know. You were in the federal parliament. I was in the provincial parliament. The amount of waste within government is extraordinary, and if we also put in place a Department of Government Efficiency, I think you could probably see even bigger cuts on the PST and bigger cuts on property tax for people in this province.
Randy, just on that point, when my grandfather bought his house for $9,000 in the 1950s and paid off his mortgage in 3 years, there wasn't any homelessness in Simcoe, Ontario, where he lived at that time. There wasn't any rampant drug abuse in that town at that time. And government spending was about 17%, I think, of our GDP at that time. Today, it's well over 40%, and we have all of those problems I just listed. We have rampant crime, homelessness, drug abuse, and the economy. The dollar is not the same as it was then. It doesn't matter how hard you work. You cannot have the strength of the dollar that my grandfather had at that time. And, I'll tell you, all of those things are related. We're pouring more and more money into all of these programs and getting less results. We need to get back to a streamlined and efficient government that is actually solving problems and in many cases getting out of the way and allowing people who have the concern and the insight and the care to solve problems. My experience in fighting politically and being an activist on social change, money is not the limiting factor. I would trade $1 million for probably 20 devoted people for a particular cause, and they would do way more than $1 million would do. So money is not the limiting factor. It's allowing people who have the interest and the concern to get involved and to make the change that's needed.
Well, and listen, just to the numbers just recently came out for 2023, and government spending now accounts for over 50% of our total GDP in this country. Over 50% is government spending. It's an absolutely incredible amount of waste and costs put on Canadian taxpayers.